Hey guys, Cam here from PhoneDog.com, and as you know, I unboxed this little fella on Saturday or Friday, last week sometime, and I've been hanging around with him for a little while now, and I wanted to bring you a video to show you the differences between this and its older brother, the HTC One M8. I wanted to compare them in terms of what you're actually getting for your money, the price difference, and what they're like to use compared to each other. Not a full-on dogfight by any means, but it is a short comparison just to give you some handy advice and to see whether or not it's worth paying for the smaller one. I will start off with the dimensions, the size and the design of the different phones. Now the HTC One Mini 2 measures in at 137.4mm tall, 65mm wide and 10.6mm thin. So that makes it about 9mm shorter and about 5mm narrower than the bigger version. And you can tell in the weight too, it might be slightly thicker, but it does weigh less. It's only 137 grams, whereas the HTC One M8 is 160 grams. So it's only 23 grams difference, and really you're not going to notice it that much in daily use. You won't pick up an HTC One M8 and think, oh, that's really heavy, because it really isn't. They're both pretty light, or at least standard weight for smartphones these days. Now what you will notice is the build materials used for the phones. The HTC One M8 is quite proudly 90% metal. I believe a mixture of aluminium and steel, or aluminum as you like to say over in the States, whereas there's a lot more plastic involved in the HTC One Mini 2. If you look around the edges, especially around the sides, you will see a band of plastic surrounding the phone all the way down to the top and the bottom, where you see it gets a little bit more pronounced. It's almost as if it's mostly plastic, but it's got sort of a metal shell on it, whereas the HTC One M8 is a single piece of aluminium, which they've kind of dug into with their magical chisels and routing machines. Both phones feel really well made, and although there's a difference in the materials, both feel really solid and really quite premium when you're using it and holding it in day-to-day use. Both feel pretty good. In fact, both feel very good. So you're not really having to make any compromises on that front when it comes to buying the smaller version. But probably the next biggest talking point is the display, and that's what a lot of people seem to focus on these days. On the HTC One Mini 2 you have a 4.5-inch screen, so it's half an inch smaller than the HTC One M8, but you're also getting fewer pixels. It's a 720p display on the HTC One Mini 2, which gives you a pixel density of about 326 pixels per inch. Whereas the HTC One gives you 441 pixels per inch, so it is noticeably sharper. The HTC One Mini 2 uses Super LCD 2 technology, the HTC One M8 uses Super LCD 3 technology. Now in terms of sharpness, the HTC One Mini 2 again is pretty sharp. It's got the same pixel density as an iPhone 5 or iPhone 5S, iPhone 4, so it is a pretty sharp display, but where you will notice the difference between the two is in brightness and colours. Whether or not it's all down to the LCD panel, or if part of it's down to the different graphics processing unit in the phone, you do notice a difference in terms of colour. Now on the HTC One M8 and the Mini 2 I had the same wallpaper loaded, but one on the M8 looked like it had a way more contrast, it had a much better tone in terms of colour, whereas the HTC One Mini 2 seemed a little bit faded and washed out and nowhere near as bright. So there is a difference in the display. But if I was to say that the LCD panel on the HTC One Mini 2 was poor, I would be lying. It is still a good, sharp display. It's just not as good as the One M8. The biggest difference is in the camera makeup of these phones. This only has one on the back. So because it's 13 megapixels, you will get pretty sharp pictures. Where you'll notice the difference is that it doesn't enable you to do the same things as the dual U-focused camera system on the HTC One M8, and to you that might be a good thing. The dual camera system on the One M8 is widely regarded as being slightly gimmicky. So it's nice to kind of return to the 13 megapixel just straight up camera. Another difference in the camera system is that you will get only one LED flash on the One Mini 2, whereas the One M8 has a sort of iPhone 5S style flash where you have two different LEDs flashing different colours to give you a more natural skin tone. Personally, I don't really ever use a flash, especially not when I'm taking pictures of people, so that hasn't really made an impact on me at all. but it might to you. So if you're one of those people that likes to go out at night into nightclubs taking flash photography pictures of all your friends, then great. You might want to consider the M8. Now the One Mini 2 doesn't have the same processing power as the One M8 either, but if I was to say that it was slower or noticeably lagging compared to the One M8, I would be lying. Performance has been really good. It has a Snapdragon 400 quad-core 1.2 GHz processor, whereas the One M8 has the Snapdragon 801 series 2.3 GHz quad-core processor. Now what's interesting and what's important to notice here is that because the display technology isn't the same and there are fewer pixels to power on the One Mini 2, it doesn't need the same kind of processing power that the One M8 has. It needs all that extra power for the larger screen with the more pixels to make it brighter, sharper, and to run all the tasks it needs to run as well. Side by side, it might be slightly faster on the One M8, but in daily use, not once did I think of the One Mini 2 that I needed it to be faster or needed it to be performing better, because it doesn't. It still does really, really well. Both phones run Android 4.4.2 out of the box, and both phones are expandable up to 128 gigabytes. Both phones available in 16 gigabyte models, but the HTC One M8 does have a 32 gigabyte model on the market. Both of them have similar wireless technologies too. Both can use LTE Category 4 up to 150 megabits per second downloads. Where there is a difference on the wireless side is with Wi-Fi. This only goes up to N technology, whereas the wireless technology on the HTC One M8 it goes all the way up to AC, which is the latest craze. This phone has a 2110 mAh battery, which isn't as much as the 2600 mAh on the HTC One M8, but both are equipped with power saving mode and extreme power saving mode, so you'll easily get a day and a half out of both phones. Both phones also equipped with boom sound and their own individual amps to make the sound fantastic and loud. So all in all, the tiny differences between the two, there's not really that much that separates them in my mind. The biggest difference that I noticed was with the display. Everything else seemed really good on the HTC One Mini 2, and price-wise, I don't have a US price right now for the One Mini 2, but in the UK the recommended retail price for the One M8 is about £550, whereas the HTC One Mini 2 is £200 cheaper. And it's definitely not a £200 difference in performance. So all in all then, the HTC One Mini 2 is a fantastic phone in its own right. If you're looking for something that looks and feels like an HTC One M8 but you can't stand the big size because either your hands are too small or you like to use your phone one-handed or for whatever reason, then the HTC One Mini 2 doesn't have that many compromises that you're going to wish weren't there. It's a great phone. And Cam, I'm at PhoneDog_Cam on Twitter. If you want to ask me any questions about the One Mini 2 in the future, please use the comments or you can grab me on Twitter. And I will see you again soon.